Вот военнослужащие, все с палками. Кто как раненый, у кого руки, у кого ноги. Я глухой, тоже с палкой. Вот он я, вот ребята. Нас отправляют всех сегодня на войну.
Okay, so this first clip I am going to go over is going to be from JD Vance. It was his speech that he gave in Munich just a few days ago, and it is very frustrating from a person who is a supporter of Ukraine and of Europe for that matter. So, anyways, here's the first beginning clip of that speech. Get your stress ball ready.
And we also believe that it's important in the coming years for Europe to step up in a big way to provide for its own defense.
Europe stepping up with their military spending is something that I was talking about in my last video. So if you haven't seen it, you might want to check it out.
The threat that I worry the most about vis-a-vis Europe is not Russia, it's not China, it's not any other external actor.
Okay, I just got to stop that right there. This guy is an absolute moron. How is Russia not somebody that is a threat? They are the biggest threat in this entire world. No doubt about it. They are 50,000 times more dangerous than ISIS because it's an entire country that has capabilities far beyond anything that these terrorist organizations have. China wants Taiwan back. Russia is already invaded Ukraine. And the fact that this Trump administration does not condemn it and they think that they're not a threat is just mind-blowing to me. Let's move along.
And what I worry about is the threat from within, the retreat of Europe from some of its most fundamental values, values shared with the United States of America.
That is funny because I guarantee you, JD Vance and the Trump administration do not have the same values as majority of Americans. Majority of the people that voted for them, I guarantee you, did not know that they were going to be pulling all this crazy radical, crazy nonsense after they won the presidential election.
Now, I was struck that a former European commissioner went on television recently and sounded delighted that the Romanian government had just annulled an entire election. He warned that if things don't go to plan, the very same thing could happen in Germany too.
That happened in Romania because of Russian election interference. That is the right thing to do. There's not supposed to be any other countries interfering in elections, which Russia clearly did with the Romanian presidential election that just recently happened. So I don't know why JD Vance would be talking as though Romania's government is in the wrong. That is absolutely the right thing to do because that is wrong to be interfering. We have the same laws here in America that there can't be any out-of-state actors interfering in our elections. So I don't get why he's not condemning the fact that Russia did that. They don't condemn anything that Russia does that's illegal, negative, killing, anything. This Trump administration does not condemn any of it.
Now, these cavalier statements are shocking to American ears. For years, we've been told that everything we fund and support is in the name of our shared democratic values. Everything from our Ukraine policy to digital censorship is billed as a defense of democracy. But when we see European courts canceling elections and senior officials threatening to cancel others, we ought to ask whether we're holding ourselves to an appropriately high standard. And I say ourselves because I fundamentally believe that we are on the same team. We must do more than talk about democratic values, we must live them. Now, within living memory of many of you in this room, the Cold War positioned defenders of democracy against much more tyrannical forces on this continent. And consider the side in that fight that censored dissidents, that closed churches, that canceled elections. Were they the good guys? Certainly not. And thank God they lost the Cold War. They lost because they neither valued nor respected all of the extraordinary blessings of liberty. The freedom to surprise, to make mistakes, to invent, to build. As it turns out, you can't mandate innovation or creativity, just as you can't force people what to think, what to feel, or what to believe. And we believe those things are certainly connected. And unfortunately, when I look at Europe today, it's sometimes not so clear what happened to some of the Cold War's winners. I look to Brussels, where EU commissars warn citizens that they intend to shut down social media during times of civil unrest the moment they spot what they've judged to be, quote, hateful content. Or to this very country, where police have carried out raids against citizens suspected of posting anti-feminist comments online as part of, quote, combating misogyny on the internet, a day of action. I look to Sweden, where 2 weeks ago the government convicted a Christian activist for participating in Koran burnings that resulted in his friend's murder. And as the judge in his case chillingly noted, Sweden's laws to supposedly protect free expression do not, in fact, grant, and I'm quoting, a free pass to do or say anything without risking offending the group that holds that belief.
It's crazy how J.D. Vance is talking so much about freedom of speech and freedom for this and that. Right here in America, just last week, the Associated Press was banned from being in the room of the Trump administration's press secretary because they would not call the Gulf of Mexico, now they wouldn't call it the Gulf of America. Because they would not call it that, they were kicked out of the room with all the journalists, with the Trump administration's press secretary, to get the updates on everything that's going on in the White House. So, I mean, that's crazy for somebody to get kicked out for something like that. I mean, where's the freedom of speech in that? What if it was just an accident? But regardless, I mean, that is crazy because, I mean, how hypocritical is that? I mean, that's crazy.
And perhaps most concerningly, I look to our very dear friends, the United Kingdom, where the backslide away from conscience rights has placed the basic liberties of religious Britons in particular in the crosshairs. A little over 2 years ago, the British government charged Adam Smith Connor, a 51-year-old physiotherapist and an Army veteran, with the heinous crime of standing 50 meters from an abortion clinic and silently praying for 3 minutes. Not obstructing anyone, not interacting with anyone, just silently praying on his own. And after British law enforcement spotted him and demanded to know what he was praying for, Adam replied simply, it was on behalf of the unborn son he and his former girlfriend had aborted years before. Now, the officers were not moved. Adam was found guilty of breaking the government's new buffer zones law, which criminalizes silent prayer and other actions that could influence a person's decision within 200 meters of an abortion facility. He was sentenced to pay thousands of pounds in legal costs to the prosecution. Now, I wish I could say that this was a fluke, a one-off crazy example of a badly written law being enacted against a single person, but no. This last October, just a few months ago, the Scottish government began distributing letters to citizens whose houses lay within so-called safe access zones, warning them that even private prayer within their own homes may amount to breaking the law. Naturally, the government urged readers to report any fellow citizens suspected guilty of thought crime. In Britain and across Europe, free speech, I fear, is in retreat. And in the interest of comedy, my friends, but also in the interest of truth, I will admit that sometimes the loudest voices for censorship have come not from within Europe, but from within my own.
So after hearing J.D. Vance's speech, it's not over, by the way, but it seems like his only goal was to scold every European country individually about something that they have done wrong, as though our country is perfect, or as though I know I mean, I don't know why he's talking like they're so holy and so perfect. And I mean, the nerve to scold these other countries. Every country has their own laws and their own things, but for him to be scolding them is just absurd. So I don't know where he was going or what the point of him doing this was. But if it was to piss everybody in the room, to just piss them off, or to make even more people dislike him, then he smashed it. He he accomplished that goal.
Country where the prior administration threatened and bullied social media companies to censor so-called misinformation. Misinformation like, for example, the idea that coronavirus had likely leaked from a laboratory in China. Our own government encouraged private companies to silence people who dared to utter what turned out to be an obvious truth. So I come here today not just with an observation, but with an offer. And just as the Biden administration seemed desperate to silence people for speaking their minds, so the Trump administration will do precisely the opposite, and I hope that we can work together on that.
That was bullshit.
In Washington, there is a new sheriff in town, and under Donald Trump's leadership, we may disagree with your views, but we will fight to defend your right to offer it in the public square, agree or disagree.
You notice the lack of clapping hands? Everybody hates this guy.
Now, we're at the point, of course, that the situation has gotten so bad that this December, Romania straight up canceled the results of a presidential election based on the flimsy suspicions of an intelligence agency and enormous pressure from its continental neighbors. Now, as I understand it, the argument was that Russian disinformation had infected the Romanian elections.
The fact that the Trump administration always believes Russia over their own intelligence agencies is mind-blowing. That's what those agencies are for intelligence, to provide proof, to provide evidence. And in this case, just like many, many others, Russia was interfering with Romania's election. But again, this administration is just gonna, act like as though Russia didn't do anything.
But I'd ask my European friends to have some perspective. You can believe it's wrong for Russia to buy social media advertisements to influence your elections. We certainly do. You can condemn it on the world stage even. But if your democracy can be destroyed...
The only reason that makes sense to me that J.D. Vance and the Trump administration would act as though it's not a big deal that Russia interfered with Romanian elections is because it is a known fact that Russia interferes in our own elections here in America on behalf of Trump. But enough of J.D. Vance. Let's see what President Zelensky had to say just a little while later on the same stage.
Let's be honest, now we can't rule out the possibility that America might say no to Europe on issues that threaten it. Many leaders have talked about Europe that needs its own military, an army of Europe.
That is seriously probably one of the best ideas ever. An army for Europe, in Europe, is something that should have happened decades ago. But the only reason why it hasn't is because majority of these European countries have fallen under the umbrella of being protected by the U.S. But now that this new administration is pulling us back in isolation, like they did after World War I, the rest of Europe is like, what the heck is going on? So this is a great idea. They need to jump on it like yesterday, because unfortunately for the next 4 years, this administration is going to undo every single thing that our country has been about, what are the values that this country has been based off of. this administration is undoing everything. So for the next 4 years, the Europeans and everybody who has depended on the U.S. is going to have to find other solutions because this administration, unfortunately, isn't trying to help anybody, regardless of who they are. So, I guess everybody's just gonna have to hang in there for 4 years until this nightmare is over.
And I really believe that time has come. The armed forces of Europe must be created.
I swear, President Zelensky is like the greatest president ever. I wish America had a president as good as President Zelensky. That guy is so amazing. He does so many great things for his country where his people always come first. And I wish I could say the same about America, but that just isn't the case right now. So, right now, there is an emergency meeting in Paris that President Macron had um had called for. So all the European prime ministers and all the public top officials are in Paris right now to try and figure out what is going to be the next step for securities in Europe and how they're going to help Ukraine with security guarantees moving forward, since the Trump administration has already laid it out that we are not going to be helping them and they are not going to be able to depend on the U.S. moving forward. So I think that's a great thing to do. I think everybody's still in shock and they're trying to figure out like what just happened. But at least they are, you know, waking up quick and they're realizing that they need to do something now. So later on in the week, we'll find out and see what else other developments there are. But for now, let's just cross our fingers and hope that there's something good that comes out of this meeting in Paris right now. And of course, uh, Ukraine is the main reason that I make these videos. Um, they deserve all the attention in the world. They are fighting for their survival, and this war needs to come to an end, but it needs to come to an end with Ukraine in mind. It's irritating that all these world leaders are trying to make all these negotiations and they're not including Ukraine. The war is being fought in Ukraine. That's the dumbest thing I've ever heard of. So, but President Zelensky's he's no dummy. That guy is, man, like I said, he's a badass president and he's a very very smart dude. So nothing is going to be final until Ukraine and Zelensky have the last say in it. They don't have to agree to anything that they're not comfortable with. So, anyways, that's going to do it for me. And I guess I'll see you guys on the next one. Hopefully later on this week. Later.